So when the editor of Wired asked that I tell a compelling personal story, but also talk about the future of venture capital, and to also talk about something I've never talked about before, I thought to myself, oh crap, that's quite a challenge. But then I remembered that venture capital, the business of funding startups, much like startups themselves, looks at the world not just in terms of what it is today, but it asks the question, what could it be? And I stepped back and I realized I've basically been asking questions like that my whole life. And in this connected world that we live in today with things like phones, and you can play Angry Birds or Flappy Bird or whatever bird on your phone, so too can we use this technology to vote with our money and our support on what new ideas we wish to bring to light. And online venture capital, online VC, lets us all question the world and act on that questioning to change it, all while in our pajamas. So I wanted to start off in the beginning. So as a kid, I was born in the United States, but I'm actually a byproduct of the former British Empire to some extent. My mom's from Hong Kong and my dad's from India. And I mention that because it's actually quite relevant to my upbringing. I was caused to question a lot of things. For example, my dad, who's a Hindu, and my mom, who's Christian Catholic, had different views on religion. And so as a young child, I was thinking, is there one God? Are there 330 million gods? Or maybe there's no gods at all. And I still wonder that sometimes. But to their credit, my parents really helped me be inquisitive. They let me figure things out on my own a lot. I remember loving playing with electronic toys and gadgets, but more so than playing with them, I liked to figure out what made them tick and work. And in particular, I remember this one red remote-controlled race car. I loved driving that thing, but more so, I remember cracking it apart, breaking it, and seeing how it worked. And I thought I was unique in this regard as far as being a kid who would break his favorite toys to figure out how they work. But in making this slide, I actually found an image posted by a mom of her son who had done the exact same thing. And the reality is, we are all curious about the world around us. We all ask questions, and we all wonder, what's next? How does this work? Why is this the way it is? There's actually, at least we start off that way. There's a study out of MIT on learning, and it basically shows that explicit instruction, explicit teaching, quenches our innate desire to be spontaneous and to explore and discover things. And so perhaps in a testament to how little I enjoyed explicit instruction in class, I kind of dived entirely into a world of discovery, which was, for me at the time, science research. And I remember in high school, I actually built a science lab in my basement, sort of a cliched science basement lab. If the Department of Homeland Security had been a thing back in my day, they certainly would have red flagged my eBay account, because I was ordering all sorts of shady things. But I did so in the pursuit of answering questions. And I distinctly remember my Indian grandparents saying that mangoes would cure everything, and I really wanted to see if that was true. And so I tested mango extracts on cancer to see if that would kill cancer. And if you're wondering, it doesn't. But in any case, this was me, and I quickly moved while still in high school to doing research at the university level. And so I actually met this fellow. His name is Dr. Ned Seaman. He's a professor in university and a researcher. He's also a man who, late one night in New York City in a bar, perhaps a bit buzzed, actually he was buzzed, was looking at the wall and noticed this M.C. Escher woodcut, this painting here. And he thought to himself, the burning question that was on everybody's mind in the bar, which was, can we make this 3D lattice of fish out of DNA? And I'm being sarcastic, obviously. He's the only person who would ever think of that specific question. But that question led to the entire field of what's called DNA nanotechnology, which has implications for everything from drug discovery to self-assembling computer chips. And so I met Ned through a question as well. I was reading a magazine, and there was an article in it about his research. And so I cold emailed him. I didn't know him. I cold emailed him, and I said, hey, Ned, that's really cool research, but isn't it kind of dumb that you're using DNA, which is a very fragile molecule, to build applications like self-assembling computer chips that need really robust materials? And luckily, he didn't think I was a total jerk, and we started talking, and that led to a lot of research. And I didn't think it was really tremendously great research, but nevertheless started to receive a lot of awards, was published. This is while I was in high school. But I still felt kind of empty, like I wasn't really having an impact on the world, which in and of itself is kind of funny because one of the awards entailed getting an asteroid named after me, and I truly hope that that's not the one to make an impact on the world. But anyways, so by the time I got to university, I really wanted to make research practical immediately. And I went to a university that had $1 billion annual budget for research. And so I, together with some friends, started an organization called Engineers Without Borders. And we helped to build sustainable development technology in developing communities around the world. My specific group focused on water quality, clean water projects in Central America and East Africa. And so I began to think a lot about water. And for those who don't know, in the developing world, waterborne disease is the leading cause of death. And the other thing I began to think a lot about was pipe, which isn't impressive at all because if you're in the remote mountains of Honduras, digging kilometers and kilometers of trench, pretty much the only thing you can think about is water and pipe. So I began to think about water and pipe a lot. And what I realized is we were here moving water from point A to point B across kilometers. And in some cases, this water is contaminated and it's actually killing people. What if we could maybe make the pipe kill the bacteria in the water and prevent disease that way? And so that was actually the spark, the insight of, could we create a technology that could modify the surface properties of a material that sucked me into the world of venture capital? And that's because I started a company called Innova Dynamics. And actually, we ended up not commercializing that initial application of the technology. The company today makes advanced electronic materials for touchscreens. It drastically lowers the cost of touchscreens, and so much so that it even allows them to work in places where previously they've been using feature phones instead of smartphones. But anyways, the significant and relevant portion of this experience was I had to raise $25 million of venture capital to make this happen. And as any entrepreneur who has had to raise that much capital knows, you come out of the tail end of that questioning a lot of things about venture capital. And it's not that there aren't great things about VC. For example, Steve Jobs of Apple, Elon Musk of Tesla, and SpaceX probably would not have been able to do the things they did, or at least wouldn't have been able to do them as quickly as they could without their financial backers. But there's also the other side of VC. These are some of the founding fathers, the people who 50, 60 years ago started the very first VC funds. For example, that's Don Valentine, the founder of Sequoia Capital. And it's not that the best VCs aren't doing great. The best VCs actually do exceptionally well. It's actually that there's deserving companies out there that are working on great ideas that aren't getting the proper funding. And if they were, we could move the world forward a lot faster. And what do I mean by that? Just as evidence to back that up, last year, 2/3 of companies that exited, that means they IPO'd or had an acquisition, never raised VC capital at all. And a study by the Kauffman Foundation of the Inc. 500's list of fastest growing private companies found that over an entire decade of time, only like 85% of those companies also never raised VC capital. And so there's definitely deserving companies out there. And I realized, reflecting on this, that this is a question of efficiency. And it's one where the internet has really transformed a lot of other industries as well. If you think about the sharing and consumption of information, for example, commerce, and so forth, the internet has been transformational. And I thought, could you apply the internet to venture capital? And the specific question that I asked was, can you use software and the internet to enable people to come together to discover, review, fund, and support companies? And together with my co-founder and my team, we started FundersClub, and we became the first people in the history of the United States to fund a company online as a VC. And in fact, we actually got a letter from the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, last year approving our operations. And this is significant because a lot of people had tried to do this before, had thought, why don't we use the internet to do online investing in startups? And initially the lawyers would tell you because it's illegal. And we just kept questioning why, why is that not legal? Is there a model that would actually make this work? So entirely unrelated to the Jobs Act, through using the traditional VC model, we were able to bring this whole structure online. So actually all of the platforms in the United States that currently exist that use a centralized special purpose fund vehicle to take small amounts of capital so that investors can diversify and write relatively small checks in startups. But the fund itself is able to write one big check. We brought that model online. Now, the first company we funded, or one of the first companies we funded, is called Coinbase. And they asked the question, what would money and payments processing look like if it was invented today? And the answer is it would be instant, it would be digital, and it wouldn't cost any money to move money from point A to point B. And that seems rather obvious, but actually when they first got started, they had a lot of trouble raising money. Today, they have a who's who list of prominent VC backers. They have billion-dollar customers. But in the beginning, it was very difficult for them. We actually found, though, that there were pockets of people all across the globe who had some sort of arbitrage on information, on insights, on experience that caused them to, before the rest of the traditional VC industry, see the promise of this technology and this company. And so we were able to coalesce this capital together in this support, and we were one of the first checks to support this company, one of the first investors to support this company. So today, it's been less than 2 years. Our investors, our users, have invested over nearly $20 million in over 80 companies. And these are companies doing everything from building the world's largest on-demand grocery delivery service, that's Instacart, to one of the world's first cameraless gesture motion input devices, that's Thalmic Labs, which has the potential to have impact much like the mouse or the keyboard on how we interact with technology. And those companies have actually gone on to raise additional capital, over $250 million in the last 2 years, from some of the traditional VCs, folks like Sequoia, Andreessen, First Round, Spark, Intel, and so forth. And we've also started to go global, even though we started off in the US. We have members from 33 countries, over 33 countries, and our companies, while concentrated in the US, are also headquartered in Canada, they're in Europe, they're in Central America and Asia. And significantly, our members are people much like in this room today. They're people who are C-level executives, entrepreneurs, engineers, VPs, directors. These are folks who not only help us discover new companies that a traditional VC might not know about, but also helps to review them and to support them. And so through that network, we've been able to help companies hire candidates, find partners, find customers, and there's hundreds of examples of this that have occurred so far. So in closing, I wanted to point something out about this new collaborative world that we're living in today. Rather than simply letting the future happen to us, we can join forces together with other like-minded individuals, and we can ask questions. We can ask, what should the future look like? And we can together fund and support that future to happen, and we can together profit from that foresight and from that curiosity. And I think that's a really, really beautiful thing that we get to do these days, and that's all I have to talk about today. Thanks.
Alex, if you, in some strange parallel world, were made a partner at one of the big VC firms, how would you change the way they operate on day one?
So that's an interesting question. So I think that for us, we don't actually see, FundersClub does not view what we're doing as at odds with the traditional venture community for two reasons. One is we often are either preceding their investments, right? So for example, companies that we fund go on to raise capital from them, but also because we're helping them come online. So also a lot of VCs are actually co-investing with them. And there's a future world actually, which is going to happen, where every single VC firm is online. That's just inevitable. Over time, what we'll see is a lot of the things that I'm talking about, benefiting from network effects and software and the efficiency that this brings, will feed into every single traditional VC firm.
What's your next investment?
If I told, I guess I can't tell you.
What sort of things are you seeing the biggest opportunities in?
So, I mean, this is like a common question I think that's always asked, and I think the thing to keep in mind is, so I'll answer your question, but the thing to keep in mind about that type of question is often the most disruptive companies weren't obviously part of a trend. They might have been in retrospect, but it was never quite clear. For a classic example of this is Google, right? Which at the time that got started, there was all these other search engines like Yahoo and Alta Vista, which were regarded as the leaders in at that time in search. So with that caveat, I'll point out, I mean, we're seeing a lot of new companies crop up in sort of the consumerization of enterprise, sort of making, it used to be enterprise technology needed a stack of manuals this thick, and that doesn't make sense anymore in this world. We're seeing still the trend of mobile, even though that sounds like it's been going on forever, but actually still mobile continues to tick up, and there's a lot of opportunities in mobile-first undertakings. We're seeing the resurgence of hardware, which for me is very warming, having previously started a hardware company, and that's because the cost of starting a hardware company has come down much like it has with software. We're starting to see more interest in things like AI and the connected home, Internet of Things. These are all trends that are happening now, and there's probably a lot more, but yeah.
Great. Thank you, Alex Mittal.